Man, Steam was one of the good ones. In an industry where it feels like every single game studio is trying to take advantage of you, Steam has always been there, just existing as a neutral platform to literally buy and sell games, no matter what they were. Unlike the Apples or the Googles of the world who love to inject their own moral compass into the stores, it seems like every single time there was a controversial game, Valve just let it exist on Steam. As long as it literally wasn't illegal, they would let the people decide if it was appropriate. We could decide with our wallets what games were good, what games were bad, and everything would just kind of sort itself out. But as of today, that has changed. Valve has stood up to the angry Karens of the world, to the journalists, the Kotakus, the outraged Facebook groups, and even at times governments, but money is where they draw the line. Payment processors like Visa and Mastercard have successfully pressured Steam to remove certain games from the Steam store page, and as of writing this, hundreds of games have been delisted for various sexually explicit themes, and it doesn't look like it's going to end there. An Australian activist group called Collective Shout is behind the lobbying, and their goal is to remove any type of misogynistic, sexually explicit, and abusive content in gaming. We've seen activists try and do things like this in the past, but I think this may be one of the first times such a large-scale protest like this has actually been successful, especially against a company that is so notoriously anti-censorship like Valve is. Now, I'm going to be honest here, some of these games that were delisted, I'm personally shocked that they were even on Steam to start with, okay? I can't believe there was an audience for some of these. But what we want to focus on is the method that Collective Shout is using to pull the strings and force the hands of companies like Mastercard and Visa. That is really what we should all be worried about today. I think we can all agree that certain things are morally abhorrent and shouldn't exist in a modern society, but we can also agree that government and corporate overreach is a very slippery slope. So today, we're going to talk about what's happening on the Steam store page, but we're also going to take it one step further and answer why. Why is Steam kneeling to these payment processing companies? Why are these companies even listening to this random Australian group? Who is Collective Shout? Do they have any valid arguments? Or is this all just Puritan fear-mongering with the goal to once again blame angry gamers? A few days ago, Steam updated their publishing guidelines to state that they are no longer allowing and will remove any content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks or internet network providers. And before we go any further, we need to realize just how broad of a statement this is. Valve just amended Steam's publishing guidelines to say that payment processors, banks, card networks, or even internet network providers now have a say in what can or can't be sold on Steam. This isn't a type of governmental body or legal entity stating that Steam has to follow certain laws, but instead it's just greenlighting some exec over at Visa, Mastercard, Chase Bank, or apparently even Comcast to just look around the Steam store and say, I don't like that, Steam, you can't sell it. It's now literally a rule that third-party corporations have a say in what games you can or can't play. Now, as a result of this rule, hundreds of games have been delisted from Steam. But I'm going to be straight with y'all. As I said in the intro, a lot of these games I'm honestly shocked were even on the platform to start with. Like, genuinely shocked. Some of these are pretty disgusting, they're degenerate, and, well, to give you a better idea, the biggest theme that was targeted seems to be incest. Now, I'm not the target audience of incest hentai games. I don't get it, but apparently these games were acceptable on Steam up until just a couple weeks ago. The organization Collective Shout brought it to the attention of payment processors through the following campaign. It's hard to believe that any reputable corporation would desire to profit from the sale of products featuring rape, incest, and abuse of children. But we have discovered 7 who are quite happy to take a cut from hundreds of rape, incest, and child abuse-themed games, which we found on popular gaming platforms such as Steam and itch.io. And while we did get one vile rape and incest game, No Mercy, down from these platforms, unfortunately there are many more like it. Our research has shown that many of these games would breach Australian classification laws. Much of the content found within the games, including the graphics and the developers' descriptions, are too distressing for us to include on our website. One of our team members has done extensive research using her Steam account, and the content found includes violent sexual torture of women and children, including family members. It's time to make credit card companies and payment gateways like PayPal, Visa, and Mastercard see that profiting from first-player gamified violence against women and children isn't good for their reputation. Now, I don't think anyone in any right state of mind will stand up and defend sexual assault, violence against women, violence against children, anything like that, okay? I think as a society, we can all agree that all of that is not acceptable. As mentioned in their campaign, Collective Shout successfully lobbied against a game called No Mercy, which was removed from the Steam store page earlier this year. This is one of those games where I'm honestly shocked it was even on the Steam store page in the first place, as you are literally tasked and rewarded with sexually assaulting family members to get back at them. This makes what is happening on the Steam store page right now very tricky to navigate, because seeing the list of games that have been delisted makes it really hard to defend them. And in fact, I don't think I personally can. It's hard, if not impossible, to defend an violent incest game from being removed on Steam, because you then appear to defend incest. If this game has sexual violence against women and you are upset that it's being removed, well, do you like violence against women? As someone who has 2 kids, this type of stuff really makes me sick, but in an attempt to be as unbiased as possible, the arguments I've seen for keeping these kinds of games on the platform is this. If murder is illegal and incest and sexual assault is also illegal, then why can I murder people in a game like GTA, but I can't do all of this other illegal stuff? If you're over the age of 18 and everyone depicted in game is also over the age of 18, why does it matter if I have this illegal activity or that illegal activity? Where's the line? Well, as a society, this is where things get messy. In the Western world, we have decided that violence is not okay. Sexual violence is really not okay. And anything with kids is like the death penalty, lock them up for life, throw away the key. I'm not saying other parts of the world would disagree with that. I just want to talk about what I know, what I've experienced, okay? Now, I don't think I need to explain this to you, but hearing reports of sexual violence for any well-adjusted person should make you angry at the person who did it and sad for the victim. It's a gut feeling that you just can't control. A murder case is bad, but sexual assault is sickening. And when you throw anything that's happening to kids in with that, it's downright disgusting and you get angry. You hope the person who did it is removed from society and locked up for good. It's human nature, and there are well-documented cases of American serial killers that got international attention because of the added sexual nature of their crimes. It adds a whole nother layer that we fundamentally hate as humans, and it makes us sick to our stomach. So by not just using the violence angle, but by using the sexual violence angle, an organization like Collective Shout is able to make a much stronger argument, since it's human nature to dislike a lot of the stuff that they are campaigning against. In fact, they actually have campaigns that I'm sure everyone watching this video would actually agree with, like the one against Roblox and how they encourage child trafficking and support pedophiles on their platform. That is something that has been talked about endlessly on YouTube and is universally supported. But they also have other campaigns calling for boycotts against retailers who sell Playboy shirts because they consider the brand of Playboy itself as objectifying women. But that's a discussion for another time. In doing research for this video, I listened to a few hours of podcasts with various leadership of Collective Shout to try and understand their arguments for why they are so against these sexually explicit games in particular. And one common statement that was made was that these games have led to the increase of sexual violence against women. I think we all know the argument that the media has tried to spin in the past that says if you play violent video games, you're going to be a violent person. You know what I'm talking about. The common news story where a reporter says you're going to play Call of Duty and GTA and go commit all these crimes and hurt people. But we all know that that's not true now. The American Psychological Association published this article in 2020 titled, "APA Reaffirms Position on Violent Video Games and Violent Behavior." The first sentence states that there is insufficient scientific evidence to support a causal link between violent video games and violent behavior. And this is just one of the many studies that has confirmed what we all know. In fact, nowadays, it's actually harder to find studies that link violent video games with violent behavior. But when it comes to sexual violence, and that's the main argument that Collective Shout is making, it's a little more complicated. Now, there isn't a study out there that outright claims sexually explicit games like the ones that were removed from Steam lead to more sexual assaults, but there have been studies done that have found that they can have short-term effects on how men see women. In a Time article published in 2016 by Alexandra Sifferlin titled, "Here's What Sexist Video Games Do to Boys' Brains," she states, the new study published in the journal PLOS ONE randomly assigned 154 male and female high schoolers to play one of the three types of games. Video games that the researchers say contain both violence and sexism, 2 Grand Theft Auto games, games with violence but without sexism, Half-Life 1 or Half-Life 2, and games without violence or sexism, Dream Pinball 3D or Cube 2. They found that boys who played the games containing sexism and violence were more likely to identify with the character they were playing. They also reported less empathy towards the images of female victims. That did not hold true for girls who played those games, suggesting that the games may impact boys and girls differently. However, other peer-reviewed studies, like this one titled "Gendered Violence and Sexualized Representations in Video Games: Lack of Effect on Gender-Related Attitudes," which was published on Sage Journals, comes to the conclusion that gendered representations and violence in video games may not be as harmful on players' attitudes and real-world behaviors as often theorized. Now, what I'm getting at here is that unlike pure violence in video games, which we can all now agree as a society doesn't turn gamers into killers, is that there's actually still a lot of disagreements within the scientific research community on what these types of games do when it comes to gender, sexual assault, and stereotypes between men and women. Because of this, organizations like Collective Shout can pick and choose research that backs up their point of view to show that interactive video games are actually a problem and are a cause of rising sexual violence against women. In 2 of the podcast interviews I listened to, a common talking point for Collective Shout was the fact that violence against women and sexual violence was increasing, and my initial research showed that this was in fact not true. According to the official U.S. Department of Justice and their 2016 special report, Female Victims of Sexual Violence, we've actually seen a huge downtrend in violence towards women. Additionally, in an exclusive opinion editorial by President Joe Biden for Glamour in 2024, he wrote, according to the Department of Justice, between 1993 and 2022, the reported domestic violence rate dropped by 67%. The rate of reported rapes and sexual assaults declined by almost 56%. So if all the research shows that increased violence towards women is not actually happening, then what in the hell is Collective Shout even talking about? Well, apparently this is actually a very American-centric viewpoint. Collective Shout is an Australian organization and, unfortunately, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, in 2023, recorded sexual assaults reached a 31-year high, marking the 12th straight annual rise in incidents in Australia. The majority of sexual assault victim survivors were female, 84%, and the most common age group was between 10 and 17 years at the date of the incident, at 41%. So if you're an American, this argument might not have made sense, but increased sexual assault and violence towards women is actually a very real problem in Australia, and with so many people trying to find a reason why, especially with conflicting studies when it comes to the effects that sexually objectifying women in video games or sexually violent video games has on young boys and men, this results in the perfect environment for advocacy groups like Collective Shout to gain support. They can simply point to the certain study that actually supports their viewpoint, they can run with it, and then their movement will continue to gain traction. But this still doesn't explain why they have so much pull over payment processors like Mastercard and Visa. Remember, Steam isn't removing games because Collective Shout protested directly to Valve and sent Gabe an email. In fact, they probably would not have gotten anywhere if they did that. No, Steam is removing these games because Collective Shout protested directly to the payment processing companies who immediately threatened Valve on cutting all cash flow unless they gave in to these demands. So, how does some random group in Australia have that type of power? Well, in 2020, Nicholas Kristof for the New York Times wrote this article, The Children of Pornhub, and in it, he describes some absolutely abhorrent things, including this story. Pornhub became my trafficker, a woman named Callie told me. She says she was adopted in the United States from China and then trafficked by her adoptive family and forced to appear in pornographic videos beginning when she was 9. Some videos of her being abused ended up on Pornhub and regularly reappear there, she said. Now, reading this article is tough. It's really disturbing. It's hard to get through. And I have a 5-year-old daughter, so it's really tough for me to even imagine people doing things to someone that innocent and young. It is a sick reminder of the world that we live in sometimes. 5 years ago, this New York Times story broke, and it was soon found out that Pornhub had a bunch of illegal content, and they ended up having to delete up to 80% of all of their videos. As a result, we had this case, Flightus versus MindGeek, also known as Flightus versus Pornhub or Visa versus Pornhub if you're trying to search for it. The long story short of this is that Flightus accused Pornhub's parent company, MindGeek, of knowingly hosting and monetizing child sexual abuse content. During the trial, they also accused the payment processor Visa of knowing about this the entire time and choosing to profit from it. The case's lead attorney, Michael Bowie, said that in the court's own words, Visa knew that MindGeek sites were teeming with monetized child porn. Visa intended to help MindGeek monetize that child porn, and they knowingly provided the tools to complete the crime. Years ago, when this case was first filed, the judge ruled that Visa could be sued in this abuse claim as well, despite Visa's attempt to be removed from the case. However, this is a massive case and it's still ongoing. As of a couple months ago, it does look like Visa may be dismissed from the lawsuit, but honestly, that's still up in the air. So where does this leave us with Steam? Well, we now have a precedent in the United States of a payment processor stuck in the middle of a now 5-year-long legal battle with some pretty egregious accusations. Knowingly facilitating child sexual assault and wanting to profit from it is something that no company wants to be accused of. And that is what Visa has been dealing with for 5 years now. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what's going to come out from this case, but what I do know is that this case nearly killed Pornhub overnight. Visa and Mastercard immediately dropped payment processing for the website, with Discover following soon after. As of right now, PayPal also doesn't support any type of creator payments, and instead everything on the site is done through wire transfers and other third-party banks and services that are located offshore in like the Caribbean. Organizations like Collective Shout can now point to this exact ongoing legal case and use it as a way to leverage the liability of these payment processors. Although Steam might not care if there is an incest game or a young-looking but legal adult doing questionable things in that video game, payment processors do, because if it is found out that a game has illegal content on it and it did slip through the cracks, then there is legal precedent to hold these companies liable. This isn't just a theoretical anymore. This is an ongoing case and will still be ongoing for quite some time. Now, one argument that I've seen on Reddit and YouTube and Twitter is that why do people care if payment processors are part of these types of transactions anyway? Legal precedent aside, if a game is bought on Steam that ends up having illegal content on it, that's Steam's problem, not Visa's, right? You don't sue Visa over the sale of a rifle that was used in a school shooting, do you? Well, yes and no. If that rifle was purchased at a licensed firearm dealer after a background check and a proper waiting period according to the state, then yeah, Visa's in the clear. But what's going on with Steam right now is more akin to Visa processing a payment of a rifle on some black market website with no age verification or background check. Yeah, Steam does ask you your age, but let's be real, it's more or less like an honor system. There's no ID submission, no background checks. You can just say you're 18, give them a credit card, and you're good to go, right? This same exact verification system was what was used to, quote unquote, verify age of Pornhub creators 5 years ago, which directly led to millions of videos with illegal content on it. Collective Shout can now point to this past example like Pornhub's verification system and compare it to Steam's verification system and create enough plausibility that something like this could happen here. And that would now get messy for payment processing companies. The scary part in all this is that we may actually be moving towards a world where everything you do online is tracked with your real ID to verify age, because our justice system has now shown corporations that if they are even remotely related to illegal content, they will share liability. I have a feeling this new rule change is kind of like a stopgap to prevent actual driver's license or passport submissions for users, and instead they can just allow corporations to thumbs up or thumbs down content. But part of me really thinks that we're just a few years away from real ID submissions, like actually having to upload your ID just so you can buy a game on Steam. The era of an anonymous internet is truly coming to an end, and this is all uncharted territory for Valve and Steam. It's unfortunately officially opened the floodgates of corporations now having a say in what we can and can't play. But how far are they going to push this? Games like RimWorld have child slaves, and you can even kill all the kids in The Sims through neglect or drowning or a fire. Are these types of games next? I mean, it's technically child abuse, right? So if Collective Shout is excited about shutting down a bunch of hentai games that had 2 to 3 concurrent players playing at max, imagine how they react when they try and take on a commercially popular game. However, in saying that, there is one potential hope. There is currently a bill being proposed in the US called S-401 Fair Access to Banking Act, and this bill aims to amend the Federal Reserve Act and related laws to ensure fair access to financial services for all individuals and businesses, particularly those in lawful but politically unpopular sectors. The primary focus is on prohibiting financial service providers, such as banks and credit unions, from denying access based on subjective criteria or political considerations. This bill would essentially pave the way to prevent banks and payment processors from inhibiting lawful individuals or businesses from accessing their services based on reputational risk or political considerations like porn games, no matter how weird the kinks are. But unfortunately in government, who knows if this will even ever get passed. At the end of the day, the real sobering thing about this whole situation is that whether or not you agree with what has happened, whether or not you think the game should stay on the platform or maybe they should have never been on the platform to start with, there is enough legal precedent and scientific research that allows Collective Shout to have this type of power against these payment processing companies, and it allows them to win this battle against Steam. But this is a slippery slope, and although nobody's going to come out and start outwardly defending games with child abuse or sexual assault in them, especially when they're crazy hentai games that make you guys all look like degens, this victory means that the next fight against a less controversial game will be far easier for these people. I'm not sure what Valve can do apart from making their own offshore bank and payment system, but the reality is this war on controlling video games is just getting started. But that's it for me. Although you might not agree with what they're doing, I hope this did help share some context on how Collective Shout has gotten the power to do what they're doing and why Steam is reacting the way they are. Unfortunately, I think this is just the beginning, and I'm not even liking how it all started. But what do you guys think? Should Steam push back? Are you okay with these games being removed? Do you not care at all? Let me know your thoughts, and if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and share with a buddy. On this channel, I like to take a look at the latest gaming industry headlines, game development news, and game releases, and try to give a bit more critical analysis and context, so I hope you guys enjoyed. But until next time, peace.